thank you all for coming today. I'm Randy Carter. We are here with Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. The reason we're out here today is because at the last OTA board meeting, I asked, well, the chairman, every meeting since January, the chairman has said public comment is allowed, but none is scheduled for today. So I asked them what needed to be done to schedule public comment. We had some issues that we wanted to discuss with the board, and they told me we needed to apply or send a request 15 days in advance. So I did that for myself, Cassie, and Amy. And then a few days later, I got a letter back saying that there is nothing on the agenda that the OTA deems necessary for public comment. So my question is, how are we supposed to know what's specific on the agenda 15 days in advance when the agenda is never published until a day or two before the meeting? That just doesn't make sense to me. Also too, why does public comment just need to be limited to items that are on the agenda? Isn't the business of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority the business of the citizens of Oklahoma? And shouldn't we have the opportunity to speak with the board? Obviously the staff did not want us to talk to the board, so I appreciate you all being here today to give us the opportunity to make these public comments. What I want to talk about is the past performance of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. The Driving Forward program is their most recently completed project. That includes the Kickapoo Turnpike, the Gilcrease, and a number of other projects, and I've got a handout that shows what those projects were. Now, that project was originally budgeted, the proposed budget was about $825 million. When all was said and done, the project came in at $1.5 billion. From the best of our accounting, we've got a lot of researchers and people that really know what's going on with Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, and they've done this research. So that's almost a 70% cost overrun on that project. How does that happen? How do we let that kind of thing happen? And I'd like to know from the board how they can let that sort of thing happen. From my assessment, from what I've seen, and I've been coming to these board meetings since about March of 2022, so a little over a year and a half. Every single meeting I have seen numerous, they call them change orders. When a contractor makes a bid to do a project for the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, they give them a bid. The bid is awarded to the lowest qualified contractor. But in the process of completing these contracts, they come back constantly asking for cost overruns. They want more money, calling change orders, and that's what the OTA board approves. I've seen them approve them unanimously every single time. Never one has ever been questioned nor denied. So, does that mean these contractors know that they can send in a low bid, but yet then gain more money in the process with change orders? I think that's something that needs to be discussed. I think that's something that the board needs to be cognizant of, and we want to know what they intend to do about it. Now, I've heard numerous times from the director, the deputy director, and numerous people on the OTA staff. They've said, well, we've done this way for 70 years. We've done this way for 50 years. Stating that, well, we like the way we're doing things and we're going to continue to do it that way. So, that means to me that they're not planning to change anything. Let's fast forward to the access program. The proposed access program has been proposed as a $5 billion project. That's $5 billion. That's an overwhelming amount to me. So, with this, we're going to do things the way we've always done it attitude, does that mean that the $5 billion project is going to go 70% over budget? That's $3.5 billion. That would make it an $8.5 billion project. They're already approximately $1.9 billion in debt at this time. So, what does that make that? An astronomical debt amount. Now, I believe that item is more debt than the whole rest of the state agencies combined, and geometrically more. So I'm asking the board what they intend to do to keep that from happening. What processes do you have in place? What guide rails? What guardrails? What are you going to do to keep this from happening? And I think that's completely. I don't even have a word for it. It's astronomically Is it incompetent? I don't know. We need to do something about that to keep that from happening if this $5 billion, proposed $5 billion access program does get approved and goes into motion. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our next presenter. Tassie Hirschfeld is a professor, PhD professor at the University of Oklahoma, an expert in research, and also spent a considerable amount of time doing research in communist Cuba. So with that, I will introduce Tassie Hirschfeld, and we will open up for questions after we're done. So, all right, Tassie, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. Is my
oh, here, there's a knob right
limited
there.
stature creating audio problems?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all for coming out. I am Tassie Catherine Hirschfeld, professor in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Oklahoma. I'm speaking here in my personal capacity as a volunteer with Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation. I've actually written out remarks because as a professor I will go into hour-long lecture mode without a lot of prompting, and to keep things reasonable we'll just stick to these comments, but I have an enormous amount of supporting documentation. I'd be very happy to send you, put together some little PowerPoint slides with charts, graphs, and sources. That's ready to go. So here we are, standing outside today in the hot summer sun to talk with you because the OTA board refused our request to speak at today's meeting. We believe this is a mistake on the part of the board and the OTA leadership. Through various channels, we have learned that the Turnpike Authority is still trying to move ahead with its plans to build toll roads in and around Cleveland County, despite multiple unresolved legal challenges and a pending investigative audit. We are here today to inform the public, the OTA board, credit rating agencies, banks, and potential bond investors that we do not believe the Turnpike Authority is a reliable investment partner at this time. Here are some reasons why. Number one, this is a little background. In 2011, the World Bank published a detailed report titled Curbing Fraud, Corruption, and Collusion in the Road Sector. In this document, they described the results of a Transparency International study that revealed construction, particularly road construction, as, quote, the industry most prone to corruption and cartel formation. The effects of a cartel, whether in India, Zambia, or Florida, all were case studies in the report, is to raise prices above what they would be in a competitive market, as much as 40% higher in the case studies surveyed. Road quality and safety can decline as corruption allows substandard materials to enter supply chains. One study of highway corruption in Indonesia identified half of the road projects surveyed used substandard material. One road ended up 40% thinner than the contract specified. Corruption poses risk to investors and to the driving public. OTA should not be seeking any new investor funding until their financial practices have been thoroughly reviewed and all red flags addressed. The good news is that there are effective steps that can be taken to limit the potential for corruption and collusion in road building. The World Bank identifies a number in its report. The bad news is that the Turnpike Authority does not appear to be following any of these common sense guidelines. In fact, a review of its operations and practices reveals far more red flags than can be comfortably addressed outdoors in this kind of weather. A small sample includes: OTA has no visible fraud prevention programs or reporting opportunities inside the organization. They have an insular defensive organizational culture, which is why we're outside today instead of speaking inside to them. They have in the past displayed disdain for open meetings and open records laws, and I say this as someone who is still waiting on records requested over a year ago. There is a notable lack of curiosity on the part of OTA board members regarding bond issues and debt. They were prepared to approve $5 billion worth of spending with no questions asked. At least according to their sworn depositions in the open meetings case, they learned about the Access Oklahoma projects the same day the rest of us did, and they were ready to rubber stamp all of these proposals with no questions asked. During depositions, several of the OTA board members could not clearly articulate the difference between a revenue bond and a general obligation bond, which you would think would be an important criteria for someone who has the potential to add this much debt to the state of Oklahoma. There is no independent oversight The same individual oversees ODOT, OTA, and serves as the State Transportation Secretary. This is itself a violation of the OTA Trust Agreement, which states that the OTA Director should, quote, devote his entire time to one agency, the Turnpike Authority. There are multiple expensive failures of risk management. So far, the OTA has spent approximately $70 million on engineering and design work for access turnpike projects that are unlikely to ever be built. And personally, if I had been responsible for such a failure of risk management and cost my organization $70 million, I would be changing my name and looking for a new career. But that hasn't happened here, so we have to assume that this level of performance is acceptable to the agency. There have also been massive cost overruns, described by my colleague, Mr. Carter, on recent construction projects. And most importantly, as OTA's debt service payments have increased due to overborrowing, there has been a parallel reduction in the funds deposited to the authority's reserve maintenance account. This is why corruption in the transportation sector is dangerous and needs to be stopped. It is not just for bond investors, but all Oklahomans. According to the tables at the end of the August meeting agenda, the balance of the reserve maintenance fund is now at its lowest level since the financial crisis in 2009. In 2015, at the beginning of the Driving Forward program, the reserve maintenance fund balance was over $60 million. Today, it is around $23 million. In 2013, the authority's consulting engineer estimated that by 2020, the required annual maintenance deposit for the turnpike system would need to be around $58 million. The actual maintenance deposit in 2020 was closer to $20 million, despite the addition of 90 additional lane miles in that time. Non-pandemic examples show the same trend. The 2013 projection estimated the 2018 maintenance deposit would need to be around $53 million, but OTA revised that down to only $39 million. Why does this matter? Because these maintenance funding projections come from OTA's bond disclosure documents. In these statements, the consulting engineer told potential bond investors that his independent expert opinion was that the turnpike system would require yearly maintenance deposit of $58 million in 2020 to remain in good condition. Yearly deposits have declined far from these original estimates, but there has been no disclosure of these maintenance funding shortfalls to bond investors. Again, there may be a legitimate reason for this, but you need to say it out loud and explain why. The OTA also failed to disclose the reorganization of its internal audit division, which took place between 2019 and 2022. It appears for most of calendar year 2021, the audit office was either vacant or populated by ghosts, as evidenced by the empty space in the organizational chart. The list goes on, but my tolerance for hot weather does not. I will be happy to provide a packet of supporting documentation for any and all of these statements and any additional charts, graphs, tables, sources that you might like. As a final closing note, I want to thank the anonymous individuals who have come forward to share their stories and provide details of the poor management at OTA. It takes tremendous courage to stand up for ethics and accountability in an organization that seems determined to punish dissent and outlaw criticism. All of us at Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation want to support and encourage whistleblowers to come forward. If you have ever been pressured by OTA management to do tasks that made you feel uncomfortable, we encourage you to reach out. The state auditor's reporting number is available on their website, and I will read it to you here. It is 855-372-8366. Thank you.
All right, Bessie, thank you. Again, we'll take any questions when we get done. I'll introduce to you Amy Serrato, again, PhD professor at the University of Oklahoma. Also a professional engineer, is that what the PE stands for? Does a lot of work with road and highway kind of projects, so we're going to rely on her expertise to share a few points with you all. A few points that we'd actually like to bring forward to the board of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority if we'd had permission to do that. Amy.
Thank you. So what I want to speak to you today is if I had been allowed to speak to the OTA board today, and 15 days ago I had been given the agenda, I would speak to agenda item 1098, which is the approval of payment registers for the month of June 2023.
Excuse me, can you kind of watch the paper and run through here tonight?
Sure, sure.
There you go.
Hold it on. Hold it on there.
It's just rustling.
Perfect.
You can hear
Is that-
it rustling.
Okay.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
You want her to
Better?
start over?
No, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to do today is pretend that you're the board, and I'm going to question some habitual cost overruns on not to exceed contracts buried in the payment registers. And I'm going to ask why we spend so much money on public relations and point to poor cost estimation and contracting practices that lead the OTA to spend 3 to 12 times more per mile to construct a roadway than the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. So according to Statute 69, Section 1705, the minimum and maximum wages for the construction of the roads, highways, and projects provided for in Section 1701 through 1734 of this title shall be in accordance with the schedule of wages used or adopted by the Commission in Construction of State Highways. And all contracts for construction work on turnpike projects shall be let to the lowest possible bidder or bidders after notice by publication in a newspaper published in the county where the work is to be done in 2 consecutive weekly issues of the newspaper. So if the statute requires the OTA to use the same schedule of wages to construct their toll roads, and the OTA uses the same engineering consultants and highway contractors as the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, with the requirement that they use the lowest responsible bidder, then why are the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority costs significantly higher per mile than when ODOT constructs the same type of roadways? So, some of the reasons are, often the board is requested to approve or disapprove authorizing the director to negotiate and execute an agreement of contract with a vendor, engineering consultant, or contractor without any background information. And in many cases, the amount of the contract isn't even in the agenda item, or the budget for the board to vote on. For example, in January of 2021, agenda item 763 asked the board to approve or disapprove a 3-year contract execution for traffic engineering services with CDM Smith, with 2 1-year extension options available. But there was no additional information given about the scope of work or budget. Just so you know, CDM Smith was the same company that the OTA hired for the Driving Forward program, and their final report wasn't completed until after the Kickapoo Toll Road was nearly built, making the findings of that study irrelevant. Fast forward to today, and the Access program, since February 1st of 2021, the OTA has paid CDM Smith more than $1.8 million and counting to produce an OTA system comprehensive traffic and revenue study, which was to include a summary of an economic and demographic growth assessment, traffic counts, and revenue forecasts on turnpikes, including the proposed Southern Extension route. This TNR report was theoretically contracted in part to justify the proposed routes, but more than 2 years later, this traffic and revenue report is still not complete, yet the invoices are still being generated and still being paid with no end in sight, and the OTA has irresponsibly moved forward with paying for engineering design on these routes to the tune of more than $70 million. Part of that $70 million, as you know, was spent on designing routes that were designed across federal title lands, and in December of 2022, the federal government denied passage. And later, the entire Access program was halted by Tim Gatz on April 14th of 2023. So the OTA is spending $1.8 million and counting on a pencil-whipped, superficial engineering report that was contrived to show route need after the fact, on a route that was denied by the federal government. CDM Smith is just one example of many uncontrolled and seemingly unmonitored large dollar contracts in the monthly payment registers that you, the board, approve. Has no added value to the mission of providing good transportation design to the citizens of Oklahoma. And since February of 2022, the OTA has spent nearly $500,000 on public relations, including social listening campaigns, which are summarized and sent to the board members as well as the governor. They send money to run radio and social media ads, sponsor the local television stations with PIKE Pass, and engage in opposition research, which included buying domain names to try and stop the opposition from having a platform to communicate. They have a history of trying to silence the public, which is what they continue to do by not allowing public comment at their board meeting today. With their ballooning debt payments, they should consider spending their monies elsewhere, because these expenditures also have no added value to the mission of providing good transportation design to the citizens of Oklahoma. And another reason it costs so much to construct a roadway when the OTA is in charge is that the OTA moves forward with design contracts without performing current investigative studies, and therefore the engineering consulting design contracts become merely estimates of what it might cost to design. The designs are performed in a rushed manner to allow the OTA to move forward with eminent domain takings, and subsequent construction contracts based on those engineering designs are often then missing important and expensive elements. For example, the OTA moved forward quickly to complete the Driving Forward program before the citizens could mount a credible opposition, and it ended up costing around 70% above the original budget. Change orders are standard engineering practice if the scope of project changes from what was originally bid. However, the OTA does not routinely negotiate with their engineering design consultants on change of scope. Instead, they provide lump sum contract guesstimate budgets that are routinely overspent without cost overrun documentation, and they also outsource project corridor management to a consulting engineer. It's a job of the OTA to ensure that their engineering estimates of project costs are accurate. Comparing payment register invoices with the original contracts, we can see that they have historically done a poor job. It is also the job of OTA to ensure that their chosen and well-paid engineering consultant corridor manager is properly reviewing all contracts, payment requests, and change orders, ensuring in every instance that the road is built according to the specifications and that a high-quality product is produced for the agreed-upon price. The OTA's preferred corridor manager has historically done a poor job. In order to add a layer of checks and balances on the process and better control costs, the OTA should avoid appointing the same corridor management firm to handle the right-of-way management and engineering design consulting duties. But this is something that the OTA historically likes to do. Where is the second set of guardian eyes watching the corridor manager to ensure ethical engineering and construction contracts are executed as written? OTA should do a better job of overseeing the contracts and invoices to better manage expenditures and quality. They should also do a better job ensuring the contracts and subcontracts are awarded to Oklahoma-based companies. I implore the board to implement practices of accurate cost estimates to exclude the upfront inflated padding and back-end cost overruns, and include contract provisions that provide an incentive for contractors to deliver cost savings at the end of a completed contract. I also implore the board to demand details about contracts and ask for a summary of deliverables and schedule of values to be assessed prior to approving these payments, especially above and beyond the original contracted amounts. Current OTA project cost estimation and contract execution, failing to stay within approved budgets, unfettered cost overruns, and spending large sums of monies on activities like suppressing public discourse are some reasons why I believe it costs the OTA more per mile to build a road than the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Any questions? I've got a copy of Amy's speech. We'd be glad to answer any questions if you guys have anything at this point. So I know it's hot.
You said y'all were denied the ability to speak today. So is there public comment at all?
There has been.
Okay.
In January, it was January of 2023,
Right.
when all the open meetings violation case was going on.
Right.
They opened up the meeting for public comment, and the way they did it is you had to come before the meeting and sign up to give that public comment. Since then, they've never given us the opportunity to do public comment in that manner.
And I'll add too, they did not include those comments in the minutes, so there is no written record in OTA's documents that those statements were made.
What exactly did they tell you this time, or was it just no?
I'll be glad to share with you the email that I got back.
Just kind of, okay.
Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah, I've got that email, and be glad to share
it's sort
that
of
with
surreal.
you. Oh, absolutely, yes. That's what. Yeah.
I have a digital copy. I'd be happy to email you
Okay, that's
if you have a card
that
with
one?
an
Okay.
address or something.
Yeah, you
I don't have a card, but I can write down my...
Or you can just send me one and then I can just send it back to you.
Did you give me a card?
I think I've got cards.
And my contact information is on the press release, but
Okay.
here's my card if you guys want it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, they allowed me to speak in the March 29th, 2022 meeting, but that was a special deal where the corridor manager, Poe And Associates, asked them to let me speak, and then after I spoke, they never let us.
invited you back.
They never invited us back.
No this time?
They said that there was no agenda items regarding the issue that we want to speak, but we didn't.
Well, they said that made it necessary
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
public comment,
Right.
but that was the staff deciding what might be necessary. The staff obviously doesn't want us talking to the board because obviously what we've said does not make the staff look very good.
Or
So-
the board either, for them.
Yeah, I
Well-
wanted to talk about, like I said, the payment registers. That's a really important agenda item that they just literally rubber stamp every month and don't ever ask questions because they've approved a contract with no budget. And then there's individual line items that stack up to millions and millions and millions of dollars that they're never asked, they're never questioning the scope or the product. And in this case, in the example that I gave you, there is no product.
Right.
And there should be a product if they're going to be designing these roadways. So
And I realize this is a little bit petty of me, but because I work at OU, all of my furniture in my office was scavenged from surplus property by friends with pickup trucks. And going through their payment registers between, I think, 2015 and the present, they spent almost $1 million on office furniture, and they only have 255 office employees. Like, how is this even possible, and what are you buying?